You're entering the MSP Zone, a podcast for the managed services community, covering news, analysis, and interviews from around the globe. Elevate your MSP game by staying in the MSP Zone. And now, your host, Charles Weaver.
Part 2 of our MSP Best Practices series, Selecting the Right Tools. If you have not already gone to our first Part 1 episode related to business plan, you should definitely stop listening here and maybe go back to that one, because this one will make a lot more sense when consumed in sequence. But assuming you've already done that, now you are at this point of your MSP practice where you're ready to start selecting technologies. And that's a really critical part of being an MSP. It's not just critical. You can't do it without good partners and good tools. And the whole purpose of starting with the business plan is to make your job at this point much, much easier. You still have work to do. You still are going to have to ask some really tough questions. You're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to do your research. And it's going to take some time. So I'm just letting you know that right now. But compared to 20, 30 years ago, it's far easier to become an MSP today, or at least to equip yourselves with the appropriate MSP tools than it used to be in years past. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tips that could help young startup MSPs really make the right decisions and get the right partnerships in place and acquire the right technologies to do what they're needing to do. So let's just dive right in. And armed with your business plan, which if you heard the first episode, you've got a document someplace that articulates with a high degree of specificity what it is that you're going to do in your MSP practice. It articulates not just your ideal customer profile or profiles, but it also articulates the type of services that you're going to deliver. And you need at least those two things to be answered before you can even hope to have a intelligent conversation with a potential partner. And what I mean by that is when I hear MSPs who come to us and they ask us for advice and they say, well, who should we, what's the best RMM tool out there? That's a really common question. I wish I had a nickel for every time someone has asked me that question. I will often respond by saying, well, what is it that you're trying to do? What type of service are you trying to deliver? And then we'll get into a conversation, and then I'll pretty quickly find out, because they keep pushing. They keep saying, well, I want the number one rated RMM. Like it's the number one car in the world. What? Okay, that's not how it works. There's no number one car in the world. There are pickup trucks, there are sedans, there are sport coupes, there are convertibles, there are hybrids, there are luxury vehicles, there are minivans, there are so many different styles of vehicle out there, and everyone has a class, with multiple vehicles in a class, and there's multiple classes, and there's a lot of different variety. And that's the way it should be. And the same is true with the MSP tool set community. There are really good tools out there, but I wouldn't rank them at all by, number one or number two, because that's, not how it works. There are tools that are very good for mid-market style customers, right? There are tools that really work well. They come with a little bit more complexity they come with a lot more flexibility and customization the higher you get, because that is what is demanded by that type of end user. The smaller you go, you tend to have, kind of out of the box, really nice, easy to use, kind of pre-configurations, things that integrate well with other platforms. And so you have different options as you are going to market selecting your tools. But I'm going to go through some of the tips and suggestions that I would encourage you to at least have thought about as you're going through and making your selections. Number one, armed with your business plan, you need to make sure, obviously this is a no-brainer, but you need to make sure that you buy the right tools that will fit your business plan according to what services you need to deliver. So if you're delivering a certain type of managed service, the tools need to fit that model. That should be not a fantastically difficult concept for anyone to grasp, but it needs to be stated. And maybe I should back up, because before you even get to serving the types of customers that you want and delivering the types of managed services to those customers that you want to deliver as dictated by your business plan, you also need to be aware of one thing, which is you as an MSP have to buy tools that will protect you first and foremost. And that has been something in the last 5 to 10 years that I would say has now emerged as a critical best practice, where ideally you're picking tools that are suitable for both. But let's assume, for example, that you are only delivering, I don't know, I'm going to pick a real crazy vertical market. Let's say you're only delivering managed server. You're managing servers, right? That's all you do. You don't manage desktops. You don't do, let's say you don't even do backup for those servers, for those customers. You're just doing server management and server protection, right? That does not mean that you don't need to go out and secure and obtain a backup solution. And you might be saying, well, but Charles, the business plan that you had us write says we don't have to, we have to have the right tools for the right, job. And our business plan says we're not going to deliver backup as a service to these customers. We're only going to be managing the server. True. But you also have a duty, an obligation to protect your MSP practice, your organization, your people, the data, your access into those multiple, many servers that you're going to be managing in the future. You are now a potential access point to those servers by bad people. And so you need to operate with the right tools internally and protect yourself. That means securing yourself. That means managing yourself and everything, not just managing your own servers. It means managing your desktops, your tablets, your phones. It means accessing, access privileges, multi-factor authentication, encryption, backing up your data, backing up your cloud application data. Very critical. You have to do all those things regardless of what you are delivering downstream to your customers. So in some cases, those are very identical. In some cases, the MSP is delivering all the things that they would be monitoring and managing internally, if that makes sense. But if you happen to have a very select and limited focus of service offering, you still have to have a very comprehensive internal, I would say not almost, you should have a full-fledged internal MSP operation yourself, inwardly focused. Period. That's every MSP on the planet should be able to say, we operate a full functioning soup to nuts, A to Z, everything that we touch is managed internally. And then you have a externally delivered managed service, which, is delivered and aimed downstream at your customers. Now, I'm saying all this because it's going to have an impact on maybe the types of tools that you buy. Because if, let's say, you are in the mid-market space or enterprise, right, or maybe you're the upper end of the SMB market, but you yourself, maybe you're a small shop, maybe you have less than 20 people. Yeah, it does happen. It happens a lot, right? The effect of an MSP organization that is they themselves a very small outfit, punching up, I call it, right? Punching out of their weight class, and handling customers that are very significantly larger than them is not just. It not only does it happen, it is a very common thing in managed services. It has been for a long time. So you may end up having very sophisticated downstream managed services tools and yet have a very different class of internally focused managed services tools to manage your own shop. And I'm just wanting you guys to be aware of that, to be aware of it as you're talking to tool vendors, so that you don't miss it. Now, again, if you're an SMB MSP and you are selling mostly to SMB customers, then you may find yourself able to check both of those boxes with the same tool and tool vendor partnership. Just be aware of it and know that you must, and I would argue that you should first start with securing your own internal technologies and operations and systems, and then focus on delivering it downstream. So let's assume you've done all that, and now you're ready to start engaging for downstream customer tool selection. It is a very common thing with the big four, right? I'm talking about Kaseya, ConnectWise, Datto, and Enable. And I know that there are many other RMM ticketing backup solutions out there. I am not forgetting about you guys. I know that you are out there. I'm just making a point that the kind of big four that dominate a lot of attention out there today, and not because there's not a good reason for it. They offer something that is pretty unique, each of them, which is they all have a kind of homogenized set of tools, in theory, that offer to an MSP who's, let's say, a startup, the unique ability to buy from one vendor and buy all the different types of classes of tools that they would need to be an MSP. What do I mean by that? You need a remote monitoring management platform, at least one. I know many MSPs have multiple tools, not because they're frivolous with their money, but because they need it. Right? They need the different RMN tools do different things, and they have different managed objects within their portfolio, and they demand different tools. But the big four offer, the ability to have that core RMM and ticketing tool set covered. And generally speaking, just between those two things, you will find a lot of MSPs who say, I like having both tools from the same vendor because they are, in theory, more likely to be highly integrated. There's a better user experience when seeking out the same tools from the same vendor. That does not mean that you are crazy for saying, I am going to depart from that methodology and buy a RMM from one big four company and then buy a ticketing platform from another vendor. And you may be saying, Charles, will that work? Will that be a substandard experience? Will that be more difficult? In my experience, no, because I am aware of quite a few MSPs. In fact, a lot of the MSP verified companies, where we have audited data that we can actually look at and analyze. It is a significant trend, right? I don't want to say maybe it's not 100%, but maybe it's around 50% of companies that actually don't buy across the board from the same vendor, or at least I'm talking about RMM and ticketing. But they will apply what I classify as a best in breed or best of breed approach to tool selection. That means that they go to market and they say, who has the best RMM, period. And that is, and the RMM selection is based off of their business plan, what they need, what they have to deliver. They make the selection, done. Move on to the ticketing. Who has the best ticketing platform? And the RMM vendor might be saying, well, wait a minute, look at ours. You should definitely look at it. But make your selection based on your needs and whether or not that ticketing platform is good. Not just that the salesperson has you on the line and saying, hey, well, you just bought the RMM, now why don't you buy the ticketing as well? Make the selection based off of your needs and what best suits your customers' needs. And if they don't come from the same company, that's fine. In fact, there are some MSPs who say they like the distributed risk, right? They don't like having everything bundled up into one vendor for a variety of reasons. And let that be on your... I'm not passing judgment on that right now. I'm just letting you know how other MSPs have expressed to me how they go about their tool selection process, and that is one of them. There are many MSPs who buy across the board because they like the purchasing experience. It's easier for them. The invoicing is more streamlined, I suppose. But more importantly, they believe that there is a higher level of integration. I think that is probably true, but I think that it depends on the type of tools. Like I am very well aware of tools that are sold within the same Big Four company that have not been integrated. So I think you have to make that decision yourself, and you should be aware of it, and so you can ask questions. Is this tool integrated? If it's not integrated, you may still want to go forward with that purchase because maybe it's just you get a better pricing. I don't know, than going to another vendor. Be aware of that. Know that it exists, and be prepared to ask questions. So that's a little bit about the tool selection philosophies that are out there. Buying all from one vendor versus distributing it across multiple vendors. Questions that you should ask your MSP tool vendor. In no particular order. Number one, ask about integration. Definitely ask about integration, especially if you're buying multiple tools from the same company. You have every right to ask, are they integrated? Like, what integration steps have they taken as a company? Do they work? Do all that. Number two, ask for references. Or if you don't want to ask for references, better yet, talk to other MSPs who use that same set of tools or that one tool and ask them, what's your experience? Because it's not just did the purchasing experience happen smoothly and in a way that they found favorable, but also what's it like to work with them on an ongoing basis? Does the tool break every patch, every update that they make? How is their technical support? How responsive are they? Do you like dealing with their tech support? Have they had any security events? How have they dealt with security events? Do they offer on-premise and cloud? Do you need both? Right? Going back to your business plan. Do they sell only to MSPs or do they sell to end users? That may matter to you. Their pricing. That's an interesting one because especially in the larger, it's probably not really an issue with the Big Four, but certainly if you start to go outside the Big Four and get into more boutique types of tools, you may have really fantastic tools that do some amazing things, but the vendor doesn't know how to price it in an MSP friendly way. We've seen a lot of that. So definitely be aware of that happening, especially when you get further and further away from the core group of the kind of Big Four companies. You really need to look at what is the vendor's MSP friendliness, I would call it. And that includes not just pricing and billing, right? How do they bill? How do they, depending on the type of tool, how flexible are they in terms of, do they have minimum purchasing requirements? Do they provide some sort of flexible adjustment as you grow or as you ebb and flow, right? Up and down. Do they have a correspondingly equivalent pricing program that will allow them to be flexible with your needs as they change over time? I would definitely ask that. Multi-tenancy, right? That's a huge one. I see a ton of great tools that are not multi-tenant. And for that reason alone, there's a lot of MSPs who say, you know what? I'd buy your technology in a second if it was multi-tenant, but it's not, so they can't really use it. It becomes not feasible for the MSP's workflow. So channel competition, ask about it. MSP awareness, MSP friendly. Are they aware of, not just are they aware of MSPs, because that's too easy. You really need to dig deep in some of these companies, and I'm talking again really outside of the big four community and that kind of orbit of companies that circle the big four. The further away from that, you need to really probe deeply into different vendors and ask them pointed questions about how they interact with MSPs. Do they really understand MSPs? Do they have a general channel program that is like 90% VARs and resellers and break-fix companies, and they really only have a very tiny percentage of real MSPs? That's going to matter in how they treat you, because you're going to be in the minority and you are going to be asking them over time for things that they are not equipped to deal with. And that, again, that could be the technical functionality of it, like the multi-tenancy, or it could, in many cases, it tends to manifest itself in the billing, the invoicing, and the pricing, which can become very difficult as they are doing most of their business to resellers who are just passing this downstream to customers through projects. And the small percentage of MSPs that they're working with are really wanting something different, a different purchasing experience. Be aware of it. Ask the vendor. Probe them before you buy, before you sign on the dotted line. Ask them these questions. It is very appropriate. Ask them, do they have an MSP channel program? That probably would be a good thing. Like, ask them, no, I'm not talking about a channel program. Do you have an MSP program? And if you do, how is it different than your other channel programs? Like, make them articulate to you what those differences are. And if you don't see any difference, like I just crossed off channel and we put in MSP. Well, that doesn't do anything. Those are all critical questions to ask. And the good news is, because this doesn't have to be overly complex, but the challenge becomes in having such a wide, diverse community of fantastic hardware and software technologies, and services technologies for that matter, that are increasingly being aimed at the MSP community. The MSPs do need to, especially startups, should really do a little bit more due diligence and background, kind of looking around and research to really make sure that they're dealing with reputable companies that do understand the MSP community and profession. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to talk to a real MSP. Like, every tool that you are evaluating, you should talk to at least half a dozen of those of MSPs that use that tool and really get their feedback. Just maybe even if you don't want to bother someone, just say, look, I email them. Say, I'm evaluating this vendor. Can you tell me, anything about them? Do you like them? Do you not like them? You'll get some really good feedback, if you have more of those types of conversations, and they can be really helpful. And I'm saying, don't just get the on the record profile, reference cases, right? The ones that are out there, I don't want to say shilling, but they're out there and they're noted people that are advocates for that vendor tool. They can be useful as well. But talk to the people that aren't on that list, who just use that technology, get their feedback before you make a purchasing decision, and they will likely tell you things that you would never have heard of, certainly from the salesperson, but also from the reference accounts that they give you to talk to. And don't be afraid to maybe double up. I mean, don't do it in terms of just a standard across the board, buy 2 of everything. But there are many cases where you should have multiple products. That typically manifests itself on the security technology side and on the monitoring management side. I don't think you need multiple ticketing systems. You really only need one. Backup solutions, you typically only need 1, maybe 2, depending on the type of devices you have. But it's a great time to be in the managed services profession. It's incredibly easy to get equipped with the right tools. Just make sure that you're asking the right questions and that you align those questions with your documented business plan so that you end up with a shopping list and a shopping cart full of only relevant tools that will equip you for success down your managed services journey. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you will get notified when future episodes are released. We will see you next time in the MSP Zone.